Honourable Member of Parliament, dear guests. Parliaments play a crucial role in society as legislators, the source of budgetary powers, for the role of scrutinising the executive, and last but not least, the venue for dialogue on politics and policies for advancing societies. It is therefore of greatest importance that parliaments represent us all to such a high degree as possible. Equal gender representation should thus be the ultimate goal of all parliaments. I am proud that achievements towards gender parity in Iceland enjoy broad support in Parliament, irrespective of party affiliation or gender. Despite occasional setbacks in Iceland, I hope and believe that we are on an irreversible road towards enhancing gender parity. This is of course not the case everywhere, regrettably, and we witness serious setbacks in women's rights in some countries and regions. It is my great pleasure to invite virtually to Iceland female representatives of national parliaments around the world. Since the event is virtual this year due to the pandemic, an opportunity arose to give space to more voices than normally, when only one female MP from each parliament gets the floor. Following are the national statements, the voices of female parliamentarians from around the world. Finally, may I express the sincere hope that you will be able to visit Iceland for the Reykjavik Global Forum next year. And in the meanwhile, I wish you all health and happiness and success in these challenging times. Welcome to Iceland.
Fellow female MPs, dear women, times are challenging indeed, and this year we meet virtually. Much to my regret, as you would have liked to meet and welcome you all in Reykjavik. The pandemic has put a strain in our health system, seriously affected personal health and safety, and negatively disturbed economies, societies, and brought to light an often dismissed aspect of gender disparity. A recent study conducted by two female Icelandic academics at the University of Akureyri illustrates how mental overload of women has increased due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have in recent years and decades spent considerable efforts to increase gender parity in the labor market, politics, and business, but the results of the before-mentioned study undertaking during the first wave of the pandemic bring to light the fact that the bulk of domestic chores still rest on the shoulders of women, and emotional work in upbringing and school support has in fact increased during the pandemic, with schools partly or fully closed for periods of time. Achieving visible results in gender parity, such as equal pay and equal opportunities, is the greatest importance, but achieving results in the not so visible sphere of the home is no less important. The unpaid work at home must also be equally divided, but it is not, and their before-mentioned study shows. Change starts at home, and success at home is the way to success in wider society. Let us educate our daughters and sons to be the change we all want to see in the world for a better and more equal future.
Greetings from the left-green movement in Iceland. The corona pandemic has brought crisis on all societies. Women everywhere are carrying big burdens as frontline workers in many fields, as well as unpaid caregivers. The importance of universal health care has maybe never been more obvious. In the world's response and recovery to the pandemic, it is more important than ever to have women at the table in building societies and economies, tackling deaths by defunding sectors where women are a large part of the workforce, and thus increasing women's unemployment and adding to their unpaid workload, because we know that the task they won't disappear is not the way forward. Let's stand together and protect and increase women's rights now and after the pandemic.
Dear colleagues, in the last decades, women have taken positive strides towards increased political involvement all over the world. And this year, the leadership of women in tackling the pandemic has been praised, and rightly so, perhaps even reshaping notions of female leadership. However, we must face the fact that women have been hit harder by the social and economic effect of the pandemic. We are witnessing worrying signs of increased gender inequality and domestic violence. We, as women in politics, must therefore keep our guard, do everything in our power, and challenge any trend and threats to push back gender equality issues. Let us work together and set those measures in place. It would have been so nice to see you here in Iceland, but maybe we'll get a chance later.
While it goes without saying that equality should be granted to everyone, no country can state perfect gender equality. That is why we must never forget that the fight for equality is and will be a constant and lasting task. New challenges will emerge and new generations will be born. The year 2020 has certainly reminded us of that. Through increased domestic violence parallel with COVID regulations, Polish women's battle for control of their own bodies, and constant debate on the need of independent legal rights of fathers and to parental leave in Iceland. Equality issues will never be taken out of the project list of the world leaders and have to be a part of our children's basic education.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Hind Abdurrahman al-Miftah, a member of Qatar Shura Council. I would like to highlight the journey of Qatari women and how did she make it in terms of empowerment and her very active role in the development of the country. Back in the 1930s, a Qatari revolutionary lady, her name is Amna Mahmoud al-Jada, she rejected the very educational standard practices where women used to have her basic education. And she turned her private house into the first school for young Qatari ladies. Since then, the Qatari government invested very heavily in the education of Qatari women, considering that as the best human capital investment. In 1997, the new gold age of Qatari women started by the political support, by the political leadership support of His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa and Her Highness Sheikh Hamouza bint Nasser, were both invested heavily in the educational attainment of the Qatari women and her economic participation in the labor force in general. And today, here we are enjoying the following facts. 63 representing the active Qatari ladies participating in the labor force, and their economic participation reached 53. 30% of them are occupying managerial positions. 70% of Qatar University graduates, which are the biggest national university, are Qatari females, including graduates in the law and engineering and IT and computer science. 13% of the SMEs owners are women, and Qatari women also they own more than 1 billion of the shares of the stock market. Is the journey end? No, this is only the beginning, as we say, and there are more political support needed to empower Qatari women in the future, in the present and in the future, and more of the society stakeholder cooperation in order to proceed the journey for more active role in the development of the country.
Hello, how are you everybody outside there? I'm Nadia Arobdudi, the Minister of Culture, Museum and National Heritage from South Sudan and the Member of the Parliament. I would like to take this opportunity to greet you all, especially to thanks and send the greetings from Juba to my sister, and the leader of the Women Leaders Forum, Madame Silvana. And I want to tell you that thank you, Madame, for being always concerning about the leaders in South Sudan, and also inviting us and update us about anything that related for the activities of the forum. I would like also to assure you that South Sudan is blessed with the women leaders who are there for the women to tackle the issues that related to the women in our country. We are there to cooperate and to collaborate together, and we are ready to be with you in any forum that you set aside to the women. As we know that all of us that we are passing a horrible situation, but we hope to see you soon so that we can sit in table and we can discuss the issues that are related to women. Thank you so much.
It gives me great pleasure and lots of strength to work with women from all over the world on issues on gender equality and women's rights. We need to work cross-party lines and also across national borders to put women on the agenda. Gender equality doesn't happen by itself. We need to work systematically and with big, great ambition to achieve equal rights. Nothing less is enough.
Hi, my name is Sara Heikkinen Breitholtz and I'm a member of the Swedish Parliament. I'd like to bring up 2 points that I firmly believe are at the center and core in order to achieve equity amongst women and men. In order to achieve equality, we need to ensure that women are in complete control of their own sexual and reproductive health and rights. If you cannot make choices surrounding if you want to be a mother or not, if you want to have children or not, and essentially control your own future, there is no equality. Second of all, another point that is equally important is the property and financial rights of women. Across the globe, women are not even allowed to have their own bank accounts. Both these points need to change in order for us to achieve equality for all. Thank you very much, and I hope that we'll continue discussing these very important points.
It's our duty as decision makers and political leaders to build an inclusive, hopeful future for the upcoming generation, where the future isn't just equal, it is equitable, where we can lead governments and draft bills that take into consideration the empowerment of its people and utilize their best potentials. We thrive by understanding and embracing the diversity of our communities and by addressing the uniqueness of each individually. And it's very, very important that we must make sure that no one is left behind due to their gender, race, or ethnicity.
The multitude of challenges we are facing today amidst the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic highlights the need for collective responses and synergies. I would like to stress that the role of leadership is instrumental in formulating a vision and a strategy that is inclusive and leaves no one behind in building a better future for all. Special emphasis must be put on empowering women, which represent more than half of the electorate at social, political, economic and decision-making levels. Both education and social media can play significant roles in advancing gender equality and equal opportunities and in eliminating gender-based stereotypes and social prejudices. Needless to say that gender-balanced representation in decision-making and leadership will be mutually beneficial, as it will vest the decisions taken with democratic accountability, legitimacy and ownership.
Dear young girls, women around the world, possible begin with a dream. Therefore, focus and follow your dream. Greeting from Cambodia. My name is Lau Keng, member of the Permanent Committee of the National Assembly of the Kingdom of Cambodia and WPL Ambassador of Cambodia. Today, we are proud to say that there has been significant progress. Peace is the most precise catalyst to pave the pathway toward an equitable future. We commit to give girls a chance to guide them to go out and see the world. Only by themselves, they can make change. Strong and efficient change must have the presence of women. Thank you.
This year, the whole world is experiencing an unprecedented situation. The health crisis is changing everything, widening inequalities, shifting work conditions, increasing unemployment. A lot of the things we took for granted are no longer there. Under these new circumstances with so many challenges, we must work hard to provide appropriate solutions. We must be realistic and make rational decisions based on scientific facts. We must support those who are affected by the economic consequences of the pandemic. We must defend and strengthen the protection of human rights and search for new paths for equality and justice. Unfortunately, women have been hit harder and are challenged to bear the burden of their multiple roles. So we need to get mobilized now in order for future growth to be fair and more inclusive. More inclusive meaning more women in the workforce, in the economy, in positions of power. We all have to continue fighting for social justice, human rights, and equal opportunities.
I am Jitpat Gritdagon, member of the House of Representatives and the WPL ambassador to Thailand. The year 2020 marks the 25th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action that accelerate the global effort in empowering women and girls everywhere to achieve gender equality. Unfortunately, the year 2020 also marks perhaps the most challenging year for this progress. From the COVID-19 pandemic to economic fallout, these crises have disproportionately affected women. Frontline health professionals and caregivers at home and in their communities are exposed to risk of infection and of loss of life. The majority of them are women. Women generally earn less than men and struggle more to feed the household during this economic recession. In Thailand, the government introduces economic support for families and small businesses, including direct cash transfers and state-backed loans. Negative economic effects on vulnerable people. This is going to be a long battle against inequalities. On behalf of the Thai National Assembly, my colleagues and I reaffirm our commitment to empower women, reduce the gender gap in the workforce, and support legislative power to effectively integrate gender responsive approaches into the budgeting progress. Thank you very much.
Dear ladies, history is happening before our eyes today. What our post-pandemic future is going to look like is largely up to us. It's time to ask ourselves what we can do to ensure that our future is fairer and guarantees equality. The global lockdown has brought about a huge economic crisis, one that has not spared anyone, the world of sports included. International football is a case in point. Overpaid footballers, multi-million euro transfers. Due to the pandemic, clubs are now facing financial troubles. Deep changes in this area require serious thought. The old world is gone. It's time to build a fairer post-pandemic reality in which we stop overpaying male footballers, but instead allocate funds to women's football clubs and other sports. Maybe instead of building another stadium, we should subsidize healthcare systems. Surely, science and education deserve more funding. It's our role to speak out about things that have been left unsaid so far.
Honorable Chair and participants, let me warmly greet you from Azerbaijan, express my gratitude to organizers of virtual Reykjavik Forum, and wish for a productive session with full of fruitful discussions. Today, we all unite to contribute to pathways for just and equitable future, where women will be no exception but key drivers of transformational change. All we need in this regard is strong unity, belief in our power, and equal policy implementation to make each of us feel safe and empowered. The harsh reality, however, is that we should strive to make our voices heard and represented in the world. As we are still far from the equal community we wish to be member of, despite of our proven abilities as effective leaders and agents of change, only 24% of world's parliamentarians, 20% of world's government ministries are women, with only 23 female members serving at the head of state and government in the entire world. On the positive note, however, I want to proudly emphasize that my homeland, Azerbaijan, was the first country in Islamic East to ensure women's equal suffrage in 1918. Since then, there have been significant positive development in socio-political role of Azerbaijani women. The first ever vice president of Azerbaijan, Mehriban Aliyeva, the first female speaker of the parliament, Sahiba Gafarova, alongside sharply increasing number of female parliamentarians, are few yet great examples of women empowerment. The future is universal. It's not sole future of men, neither other individuals, states and entities. Therefore, we should base our future on successful multilateral cooperation, where the voices of every single individual will be represented and heard, with women being no exception. Otherwise, our efforts to create equal societies will only contribute to widening gap of world's inequality. Thank you for your attention.
La pandemia ha reso evidente la drammatica mancanza di tutela dei diritti delle donne. Pensiamo soltanto che in sanità sono il 70% le donne che lavorano in questo settore e quindi il peso della pandemia è ricaduto molto sulle spalle delle donne. Pensiamo a tutto il lavoro di cura, il lavoro di casa che è stato in questo periodo soprattutto sulle loro spalle. Noi dobbiamo pensare di cambiare questa situazione e l'occasione del Reykjavik Global Forum dà alle leader mondiali la possibilità di confrontarsi sul futuro e pensare che nel post-pandemia noi dobbiamo superare queste difficoltà, investendo nel talento femminile e finalmente riequilibrando qualcosa che per troppo tempo è stato disallineato. Noi dobbiamo investire per fare in modo che sia conciliabile il lavoro e la famiglia e dobbiamo spingere perché le donne diventino più centrali in professioni economiche emergenti, penso al digitale, all'economia verde, alle telecomunicazioni. Il G20, che l'Italia presiederà, sarà un'occasione per confrontarsi su questi temi. Noi metteremo al centro la persona, il pianeta, la sanità e su queste cose noi dobbiamo impostare il futuro del pianeta e delle donne.
Hi everyone, my name is Evelyn Regner. I'm a feminist, trade unionist and member of the European Parliament and there, chair of the Gender Equality and Women's Rights Committee. As such, I'm now addressing you at the Reykjavik Global Forum 2020. We are living in extraordinary times and have seen that the impact so far of the pandemic is hitting women way harder than men, literally. Now, women and girls are even more exposed to gender-based violence. Figures from several member states show that the number of cases of domestic violence has risen significantly. And at the same time, women are our heroes of the pandemic. They are making up more than 75% of the workforce in jobs of systemic importance, and they keep the families running. But old cultural biases, the patriarchy, are more visible than ever. The image and reality of women is thrown back to the 1950s, cooking, cleaning children, and on top of that, you have to excel in your work through teleworking or in the frontline jobs. almost all disadvantages for women in the labour market are based on the mere attribution of this responsibility for unpaid work to women. The gender care, pay and pension gap, the high part-time employment rate for women, all this can be attributed to the stereotype of women being the better caregivers. And further, financial restraints after this crisis will make it even harder, especially since most people unemployed through the pandemic are women, unfortunately. But I promise you, I'll do my utmost to change that. The European Union has always been a driving force for equality and the guarantor of women's rights. When we are all working together on this, we'll have the superpowers to make real change. So let's make sure together that the 21st century is the century of women.
Thank you for the invitation to address women leaders at the Reykjavik Global Forum on pathways to build a more equitable future. Firstly, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm speaking, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and to emerging leaders. I also want to acknowledge the recent passing of Susan Ryan, a trailblazer for Australian women in politics. As the first Australian Minister for the Status of Women in 1984, Susan introduced the Women's Budget Statement, casting a lens over how budget allocations affect women's rights and how it meets their needs. So successful was this initiative, it has to date been implemented by another 90 countries. 30 years later, in 2014, this initiative was abolished by a Conservative government with only one woman in the Cabinet. COVID-19 has now made the need for gender analysis much more apparent. As we face the challenges of overcoming the global pandemic, there is growing concern that years of progress in promoting gender equality at home and at work have been undone. What we thought to be rock-solid commitments and accepted strategies about women's advancement are now being challenged and tossed aside. Women are now experiencing much more vulnerabilities at work and at home. In the first months of the pandemic in Australia, over 750,000 people lost their jobs. More than half of these were women. Women have lost more work, more hours, more pay, having already started on a pay gap of 14% less than men. When lockdowns commenced, suddenly women who were able worked from home, with research showing that the burden of domestic duties, homeschooling and caring for others disproportionately fell to women. It has also, in turn, increased the violence experienced by women at home. The pandemic has seen the undoing of significant women's economic advancement. The basis on which we assumed women had gained progress has very quickly been eroded. Governments must now build in gender awareness recovery strategies to focus on women's economic progress and safety. One is not independent of the other. We cannot fall back on measures that were unproductive for women before the crisis. In Australia, our workforce is highly gender segregated. Our economic recovery from the pandemic must reduce this segregation through the disruption of old systems and practices which enable the segregation to continue. The causal link between gender segregation and low economic security over a woman's lifetime is well known. Unpaid caring work must be counted as an economic contribution. And the systems and thinking which entrench this work to women must also be challenged. This is a job for all of us.
السيدات والسادة، أولت القيادة في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة أهمية كبيرة لدعم المرأة، فقد صادقت الدولة على العديد من الاتفاقيات الدولية التي تكفل المساواة بين الجنسين وتتعهد بالحفاظ على حقوق المرأة العاملة، ومنها اتفاقية القضاء على جميع أشكال التمييز ضد المرأة سيداو في 2004، اتفاقية المساواة في الأجور في 1996، واتفاقية ساعات العمل في 1982. كما أطلقنا في دولة الإمارات دليل التوازن بين الجنسين لدعم بيئة العمل بين الجنسين. وارتفعت نسبة تمثيل المرأة الإماراتية في المجلس الوطني الاتحادي إلى 50% في الفصل التشريعي 17 الحالي، في خطوة ترسخ توجهات الدولة المستقبلية وتحقق التمكين الكامل للمرأة الإماراتية، وتؤكد على دورها الريادي والمؤثر في كافة القطاعات الحيوية في الدولة. وكما بلغت نسبة أعضاء المجلس الوطني الاتحادي تحت سن 40 عاماً 25% في خطوة لتمكين الشباب سياسياً. وفي الختام أدعو إلى أهمية تدريب وتأهيل المرأة في المجال السياسي والاقتصادي والاجتماعي عن طريق إقامة ندوات ودورات وورش تدريبية للنساء بهدف رفع مستوى الوعي الثقافي وإبراز الفرص والإمكانيات المتاحة ورفع قدراتهن عن طريق عقد الشراكات الاستراتيجية مع القطاع الحكومي والخاص ومؤسسات المجتمع المدني لتعزيز حضور المرأة وتمكينها وتشجيعها على تبوء المناصب القيادية، وحث البرلمانات على إصدار التشريعات والقوانين واللوائح التي تضمن توفير التعليم للمرأة وتدعم تمكين المرأة وتحقيق المساواة بين الجنسين، وإزالة القيود المجتمعية المنصوصة في القوانين التي تحول دون قدرة المرأة في بعض دول العالم من الوصول للخدمات المالية. وشكرا.